Right now, just from reading that word, some of you are already fighting the urge. Your jaw is tightening, your eyes might be watering a little, and you have no idea why. You didn't need more oxygen. You're not tired. You just read a sentence about yawning, and your body started doing it anyway. That's strange. If you actually stop and think about it, no other reflex works like this. Nobody catches a sneeze from watching someone else sneeze. Nobody starts coughing because their friend coughed. But yawning spreads. It jumps from person to person, sometimes from a screen to your face, sometimes from a single written word, like it's contagious in the most literal sense of that term. So what is actually happening here? Why does one person's yawn become everyone's yawn in a quiet room? And why does something this small, this automatic, this seemingly meaningless, tell us something real about what it means to be a social animal? For a long time, the assumption was simple, and it felt obvious enough that nobody questioned it. You yawn because your brain needs more oxygen. You're low on air, your body pulls in a big gulp of it. Problem solved. It's tidy. It makes intuitive sense. It is also, according to the research, just wrong. In 1987, a researcher named Robert Provine ran the test directly. He had people breathe pure oxygen. He had other people breathe air loaded with extra carbon dioxide, the exact gas mixture you'd expect to trigger a yawn if the oxygen theory were true. Neither condition changed how often people yawned, not even a little. Whatever is driving a yawn, it has nothing to do with your lungs asking for air. So if it's not about breathing, what is it about? This is where it gets more interesting than the myth ever was. Yawning appears to be less about your lungs and more about your brain changing gears. Researchers led by Corey and colleagues in 2012 found that yawning comes with a small spike in heart rate and in skin conductance, the kind of physiological blip you'd see during a shift in alertness. Not a shutdown, not a sign you're powering off. More like your nervous system flipping a switch between states, waking up, winding down, or bracing for something, which is also why paratroopers yawn constantly in the minutes before a jump and why Olympic athletes yawn in the tunnel before a race. Not because they're bored out of their minds seconds before the biggest moment of their careers, because their body is undergoing a massive state change, and yawning seems to be part of how that transition gets executed. And here's a detail that made researchers look twice. In 2021, a team led by Masson studied more than 100 species of mammals and birds and found something almost mechanical in its precision. The bigger the brain and the more cortical neurons packed into it, the longer the yawn. Not a slightly longer yawn, a proportionally longer one, tracking brain complexity like a dial. Something about yawning appears to be doing actual physiological work, and bigger, more complicated brains apparently need a bigger dose of it. One leading idea for what that work actually is comes from a researcher named Andrew Gallup. He and Eldekar proposed back in 2013 that yawning functions as a brain cooling mechanism. The deep inhale pulls in cool air. The stretch of the jaw and face increases blood flow. Together, the theory goes, this flushes overheated blood away from the brain and swaps in cooler blood from the lungs and extremities, like a built-in thermostat reset. There's real evidence behind this. Yawning frequency peaks in a specific outdoor temperature window, somewhere around 20 degrees Celsius, 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Go warmer than that, closer to body temperature, and yawning drops off because a yawn wouldn't cool anything down at that point. There's an even stranger piece of supporting evidence. Breathing through your nose or holding a cold pack against your forehead will almost completely kill the urge to catch a yawn. Both of those actions cool the brain through a separate pathway. If cooling is already handled, the body doesn't seem to feel the need to yawn its way there. But here's where you have to be honest about the disagreement, because not everyone in this field is convinced. Some researchers argue the temperature shifts involved are simply too small to be the main evolutionary reason yawning exists at all. Their position is that cooling might be a side effect of yawning, not the reason it evolved in the first place. This is genuinely unresolved. Nobody has closed this argument, and anyone who tells you it's settled is oversimplifying a real, ongoing scientific disagreement. So brain temperature might be part of the answer, but it still doesn't explain the part that should feel the strangest to you, which is the contagious part. Why does someone else's yawn become your yawn? This is where the story shifts from physiology into something much more social. A researcher named Stephen Platek proposed in 2003 that contagious yawning might be a kind of primitive empathic mechanism, something wired into the same brain networks you use to understand what another person is thinking or feeling. And there's real imaging evidence behind this. fMRI studies show activation in the posterior cingulate and the precuneus during contagious yawning, both regions associated with self-processing and understanding other minds. It's a compelling idea. It also might be wrong, or at least incomplete, and this is worth sitting with rather than smoothing over. A large study out of Duke University in 2014, led by Shiruli, tested people's empathy scores against their actual susceptibility to catching yawns and found no strong correlation between the two. If contagious yawning were really a direct measure of how empathic you are, the two numbers should move together. They didn't. So the honest current read is that contagious yawning might be tied more to something researchers call social mirroring, automatic lower-level tendency to copy the behavior of people around you, rather than a genuine emotional empathic response. The two ideas get talked about as if they're the same thing, and based on this evidence, they might not be. There's a third theory worth putting on the table, proposed by Gallup again in 2022, that contagious yawning might exist to synchronize a group's biological clock. If one member of a pack starts winding down for sleep or waking into alertness, the yawn spreading through the group keeps everyone on the same internal schedule for hunting, moving, or resting together. A tired member yawns, the group catches it, and suddenly the whole pack is nudged toward the same state at the same time. And this fits with something else the research is very clear about. Contagious yawning isn't uniquely human, whatever you might have assumed. Chimpanzees catch yawns from other chimps and from watching humans yawn. Bonobos do it. Wolves do it. Even lions have been documented catching yawns from each other. Dogs will catch a yawn from their own owner far more often than from a stranger, according to research from Norcia and Palagi in 2011, which found the effect is strongest specifically between individuals who share a close social bond. Your dog yawning back at you isn't a coincidence. It's a small, quiet signal of attachment, which raises an interesting wrinkle in humans specifically. Spontaneous yawning starts before you're even born, showing up in fetal development well before birth. But contagious yawning, the catching part, doesn't show up in human children until around age 4 or 5. That's not a random cutoff. It lines up almost exactly with when children start developing theory of mind, the cognitive ability to understand that other people have their own separate thoughts and mental states. According to recent research by Anderson and Mino in 2003, you cannot catch a yawn from someone until your brain is capable of modeling that other person as a mind separate from your own. The contagion appears to be gated by social cognition itself. Here's another detail that should surprise you as much as it surprised the researchers who found it. You don't need to see a yawn to catch one. Hearing someone yawn is enough, and so is reading the word yawn, which statistically is happening to somewhere around half of you right now, purely from this sentence. Roughly 50% of people will yawn just from encountering the word itself. And susceptibility isn't universal or constant across your life. It quietly declines with age. Older adults are significantly less likely to catch a yawn than younger adults, and researchers, as of the most recent data available, genuinely don't know why. That's not a gap I'm smoothing over. That's the honest state of the science. On top of that, somewhere between 25 and 40% of the healthy population appears to be essentially immune to contagious yawning altogether, and nobody has identified the genetic or neurological reason for it. It's simply an open question, sitting there unresolved. So where does that leave you? You have a reflex that isn't about oxygen, that might be regulating your brain's temperature, that clearly spreads between socially bonded individuals, that arrives in children exactly when they develop the ability to understand other minds, and that fades in some adults for reasons nobody has pinned down. It's one of the strangest overlaps in the whole human body, a piece of biology serving what might be a thermal function and a social function at the same time. And science still isn't fully sure which one came first or whether they evolved together. But maybe that overlap is the actual answer rather than a loose end. Humans are the species that turned even our most basic physiological maintenance into a social signal. Somewhere in our evolutionary past, a reflex that may have started as pure brain thermostat management got wired into the same circuitry we use to track other people's mental state, and it never fully separated back out. You are, quite literally, built so that your body can't always tell the difference between regulating itself and syncing up with the people around you. So next time you catch a yawn across a room, from a phone screen, from a stranger, from a single sentence in a video, you're not just watching your body cool down. You're watching thousands of years of social wiring do something it was never asked to explain itself for. It just does it anyway, every time, without permission, because somewhere back in your evolutionary history, staying in sync with the group mattered more than staying separate from it.